All right, guys, this week we're comparing the Freego X2 Pro and the Surron Lightbee. Both bikes bring something unique to the table, but which one fits your style? Let's break it down. This isn't really like a one-to-one comparison necessarily because it's so different. It's kind of comparing apples and oranges. It's more of like we're comparing preferences, right? Depending on how you like to ride, seeing these things side by side, comparing the features visually, I think is helpful for some people, but it isn't a one-to-one.
No, two completely different bikes for two completely different people.
All right, first we'll start with
design and build.
So the 60-volt Freego X2 Pro features a steel frame inspired by the Surron, but it's quieter and less torque heavy thanks to its hub motor setup. This one comes with 19-inch dirt tires, which provide decent off-road handling, and the overall build is designed to be easy to pedal, making it approachable for everyday riders. However, customizing the Freego does require just a little bit of DIY knowledge, which makes it accessible for most people, I think.
Yeah, the Freego is definitely a really good starter option getting into bikes. Price point, obviously.
It is cheaper than the Surron or Talaria, and if you can't afford those bikes, if you want something that is quote-unquote street legal, this is sort of the bike that you want. It's a gray area though. It's a gray area. It's street legal here in Michigan.
Yeah, street legal and wheeliable, if that's something also you're into. And then, I mean, honestly, for just like single track or two track trails, I mean, it would still be a blast to go 28, 30 down those and cut through the corners and all that.
I think it's a good complement to the Surron. I don't necessarily think it's a replacement for it, but if you're on a budget and you wanted something that you could pedal, I think it's a pretty good option. It's clearly inspired by the Surron when you look at it, and a lot of the parts are interchangeable. So you might have some Surron parts lying around that could actually just fit on this bike, from the handlebars to the tires,
stem mounts and stuff like that. Yeah, forks, I'm sure, pretty easy to make work. Brakes.
Now, our Surron Lightbee is modified. It's 72 volt now. We put a 72 volt battery, and this is all about kind of aggressive design and performance. The lightweight frame paired with its torquey mid-drive motor. It's built for stunt riders. We have a street setup with 16-inch tires, lowering seat brackets, and a smaller rear shock. So this gives it a much lower center of gravity. This is just, you know, for my style, but you can design this however you want, depending on your height, your weight, all that stuff. That's kind of the advantage. It also has like massive aftermarket support for parts, and this thing has been around for so long. It's super popular.
I like to compare the Surron to a Grom, just because there are other options that are better on paper, but they're also heavier and there's less aftermarket options available. If there's an option available for a Talaria or an E-Ride or other similar bikes, more than likely it's already been done for the Surron and has been out for a while. So
yeah, and you know, we're in Michigan, so the laws are not as strict as other places, so it's not necessarily street legal, right? You can make it street legal. We have a bunch of videos on that if you wanted to turn it into a moped, but technically out of the box it's an off-road machine versus the Freego comes with pedals. Technically a class 3. If someone stopped you, you could probably just point to the pedals and get away with, you know, get away with it, right?
Well, yeah, I think they're both pretty heavy. I would be really curious to see what a stock Surron would compare to this. Do you know what this one weighs?
I think it weighed like 80.
Yeah, it's got to be at least 30, 40 pounds lighter than a stock Surron, for sure. Yeah. So if you have to pick it up ever and you can't lift very heavy things, yeah, Surrons are definitely much heavier, and then especially after you upgrade them. Once you upgrade them, the battery's heavier, any type of like stunt bar or subframe upgrades, the droppers add weight.
And next we're going to talk about
performance and power.
All right, so when it comes to power, the Freego X2 Pro runs a 3 kilowatt rated 6 kilowatt peak hub motor, which is capable of smooth and steady power delivery. Very common for this style of motor. It does have a custom 80 amp far driver controller with a 60 volt battery. It's tuned for a more refined, I guess, commuter experience, like for pedaling. We maxed it out at a top speed of 38 miles per hour, which is, you know, kind of disappointing, but I think there's a way to unlock it. Rumor is they're going to launch a new controller, so that should unlock the speed, but it should have came stock. It is what it is. When you get the Freego X2 Pro, just expect a smoother low-end torque compared to the mid-drive Surron.
So I wouldn't necessarily consider the Freego a fast e-bike. It's definitely a commuter. It gets up and goes. It goes a respectable top speed, but you're not getting there right away, to where, I mean, you can just accidentally twist the throttle too hard on a Surron and end up upside down looking at the sky. So yeah, two completely different ballparks, but for this and for what you would use this for out of the box, I mean, it would be very easy to find a really good purpose for it.
I think the thing that's really unique about the Freego X2 Pro that we discovered is it has a custom far driver with a pedal assist, like a working cadence pedal assist sensor. So this sensor is very common for e-bikes, and somehow they were able to splice it into a far driver controller. So this means that the pedaling sensation, it's like mimicking a torque sensor on like a traditional e-bike. It's really hard to explain without actually trying it, but when you get this thing going and you're pedaling, you really feel like you're working the pedal, I guess.
Yeah, for being a single speed, not having any gears, the pedal assist makes up for all of it.
Yeah, it kind of fools you into thinking that your legs are actually providing power, but you're just using the voltage of the battery.
Yeah, you're just triggering the sensor and off you go.
But it is a nice sensation when you're just pedaling, you're not throttling. Maneuvering this thing is pretty fun, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
So we compare that to obviously the Surron Light B. You know, this thing takes performance to another level. The motor is 3 kilowatt rated and 10 kilowatt peak. This is still the stock motor that we have on here. It also has a Torp TC500 controller, which we have a video where we installed it. They have a newer controller that's a little bit more powerful, but the TC500 is still pretty good. Delivers instant torque for those looking to tackle trails or pull off stunts. And with the top speed, I guess, what's the top speed on this battery?
So the top speed with this ranges with what sprocket you run. With your sprocket, I would guess it would be somewhere in the high 60s to low 70s. With your controller and battery combo, you're good for 18 kilowatt, and then if you upgrade your motor to the Torp motor, you'll be good for, I believe, 25 kilowatt. And the battery is capable of, I think, around 30 kilowatt peak. Yeah, it's the 7238. It's the Gen 1 compact.
Whereas the Freego is a 60 volt, 30 amp hour, unsure of the cells, and the discharge is limited to 80 amps. Again, very different in terms of performance and power. Really depends on what you like.
The cost of the battery and the controller new is about the same as buying a whole Freego X2.
All right, next we're going to talk about
comfort and control.
All right, so the Freego X2 Pro, our Freego X2 Pro uses Magura MT5 4-piston hydraulic disc brakes. Obviously, we upgraded these from the stock brakes. We felt like the stock brakes just weren't cutting it in terms of like the master cylinder wasn't quite right, and I believe the pads weren't really strong enough for our liking. Might be fine for just simple commuting, but really to practice wheeling, you want something that's just a little bit more reliable.
You want something that will bite. The brakes that were on there before were good brakes if you weren't trying to do wheelies. You really had to squeeze them, and there was no bite point. It just kind of was like a dragging sensation. It never actually fully locked up the wheel once you started moving pretty quick. So that's what the Maguras offer, is they offer more of a bite. The rotors that came on it are actually really, really good. They're really thick, and they're big enough to where they dissipate the heat and keep the Maguras nice and cool, to where they stay operating way better on the Freego than they do on the Surron.
So that's great for control. Now in terms of comfort, the seat is very similar to a Surron seat. We mentioned that earlier. We do have a Surron cover on it, so it kind of fits, sort of. It's a little bit different, but good enough. Way better than the stock cover, which was really slippery.
Yeah, and I think that if you really wanted to make this fit, I think that you probably could have added some foams in some way, and it would have fit maybe a little better, but still not perfect.
We do have a different rear shock on here. It's a D&M, smaller shock than the stock, just to lower the bike a little bit because I'm a short rider, but very similar to like a Surron shock. It's not the same size, but some Surrons come with a D&M. The front suspension fork is kind of like a generic style suspension fork. We don't really know the brand, but it's fine for, you know, this style of bike.
Yeah, I would say probably similar to like a D&M or a the RST forks.
Now, obviously, our Surron, you know, we have the moto grade brakes here for the rear wheel, and then we have a Magura MT7.
Yep, MT7 for the front.
This is definitely much stronger. This will definitely lock the bike up, and because the bike's heavier, you kind of want that. Front brake is pretty comparable to our MT5s that we have on the Freego, but they're also 4-piston. Saddle seat is almost identical, as well as the rear shock. The rear shock is similar to what I have on the Freego. It is lowered. It's not a 265, I think it's 240 millimeter. That's why this Surron is like super low to the ground. The front fork is actually a lot better. We just installed these Reflosa front forks, and they've been really, really good so far.
The seat, you know, having a seat cover on any bike is a necessity, I think.
You can really put any kind of parts on it. For instance, like these lowering brackets, it's just one piece that connects from the subframe to the actual frame. If you look at the Freego, like the subframe is connected and welded directly to the frame. So you can't really lower it in the same way, which is why I put like a smaller shock on there. Now we're going to talk about
our final thoughts.
All right, so the Freego X2 Pro, I think, is best suited for commuters looking for a quiet, powerful bike that doesn't really draw too much attention. It has a smooth power delivery, street legal potential, and a stealthy hub motor that make it a solid choice for riders upgrading from like traditional e-bikes. They just want something with a little bit more power to it.
Right, and then also with the nice suspension and the rigid frame and everything, and how quiet it is, it could be a good hunting vehicle to get you out to your stand, you know, not making a lot of noise and being able to pull the weight and be strong enough and rigid enough to go over any terrain, really. Phenomenal off-road, no complaints whatsoever. The suspension on this bike is more than adequate for its weight. For the price, I really don't think that you could beat it, and you really don't have to do a lot to it to make it really fun.
The Surron, on the other hand, is for those who want like thrills, right?
Yes, this is going to be for the more serious rider.
Has a torque-heavy motor, has an aggressive design, has off-road capabilities, and it makes it perfect for stunt riders or people who just want to ride trails. While it can be modded to be street legal, most people don't do that. So depending on where you live, it could be a gray area.
I ride them all over the country, and I generally have no issues, and as long as you're respectful, they're respectful. So, but this bike can get you in trouble a lot quicker with the power and all that, and not looking as much like a pedal bike, looking more like a dirt bike or a motorcycle.
I mean, I have no complaints. This is the one bike that's really been in the collection for many, many years now, and has gone through so many different changes from different parts and different cosmetic things, different electrical. And it's still just, it's a fun bike. You know, I don't really stunt ride it, but like when Sully comes over, he can stunt ride it easily. He could tune it to how he likes it and then put it back to the tune that I like. That's why I still have it. Otherwise, I would have sold it a long time ago.
Yeah, obviously I love Surrons because I have 2 of them.
So which one's your pick? The stealthy commuter vibes of the Freego X2 Pro or the raw, unfiltered power of the Surron Lightbee? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Bye.
Bye.